Welcome to the Historical Society of Long Beach Public Oral History Evening. I am Michael Suter, President of the Historical Society of Long Beach Board. I'm an architect here locally, and I love history. I'd like to first thank Kiesel Young and Logan and Richard Brown for their warm hospitality and underwriting tonight, if we could give them a round. As well, the Port of Long Beach and especially Director Cordero and his wife. And not least, thank you all for being here this evening. I'd also like to acknowledge a few of our distinguished guests. We've got Superintendent of Schools Jill Baker, Council Member from the 8th District, Al Austin. I didn't see you, Al. Commissioner Bonnie Lowenthal, Long Beach City College Trustee Herlinda Chico, former State Majority Leader Richard Polanco, former City Council Member and former guest speaker of HSLB Renee Simon, former City Council Member and HSLB Board Member Evan Brody, and I believe Genesis Jara, representing Congressmember Robert Garcia, and Robert Ayarte, representing Councilmember Megan Kerr. And if I could see a show of hands for the HSLB board members in attendance. Thank you. The Historical Society of Long Beach has a museum and archive in Bixby Knolls. We work to preserve the history of the city and create an inclusive community narrative through our exhibitions and programs like this one. We can only do that in partnership with our members and donors. And I'm grateful for all of your attendance, and I encourage you all to become members. Tonight we will highlight the work of a committed and determined community member. Carmen Perez's story will inspire you. I hope to understand how much she has made an influence on the city of Long Beach in changing over the last 60 years. I expect we'll hear about some hard-fought battles to increase representation and inclusion within the city, state, and national leadership. Tonight's event raises important funds to preserve HSLB's historical collections. Some collections are donated by individuals, businesses, and organizations, and others come from the city. These collections require organizing, cataloging, and physical rehousing before they are useful to researchers. Your memberships and proceeds from tonight support this work. Thank you. I encourage you to deepen your support by becoming a member if you are not one already. This event follows in the footsteps of the Mayor's Oral History Series and our interview with Honorable Bonnie Lowenthal in 2019. In 2009, we held conversations with all of the past living mayors at the time, Mayor Beverly O'Neill, Mayor Eunice Sato, Mayor Tom Clark, Mayor Bob Foster, and Mayor Ernie Kell. Fortunately, these unique conversations between elected officials are preserved for research and future generations. Tonight's program is being recorded on video and will be made available on our website. Excuse me. Our special guest interviewer tonight is President of the Board of Harbor Commissioners, Sharon Weissman. Sharon was formerly a senior advisor to Long Beach Mayor Robert Garcia, and she's involved in the Public Library Foundation. Early in her career, she was chief of staff to former California State Senator and Assemblywoman Jenny Oropeza. Tonight we will learn about how Sharon and Carmen Perez lives crossed, and Carmen and her community activities. Carmen moved to Long Beach in the 1960s and was part of making changes in the city. The city's demographics were shifting, the population was getting more racially diverse and less affluent. Carmen O. Perez has been involved in a great deal of meaningful community and policy work for decades. We have so much to learn from her. I'm honored that she's sharing her story with us tonight. Please welcome President Sharon Weissman as she facilitates this discussion with Carmen Perez. At the conclusion of the interview, we will take questions from the audience. Thank you.
So if any of you know know Carmen Perez, you know that when she asks something, you do it. And so the first thing Carmen has asked is that we recognize, of course, our host, Skip Kiesel, and see if he would like to say a couple of words. Is there...
Give him the mic.
I'm a jury lawyer and I need a microphone. Two things are inconsistent, but not my friendship with these two wonderful people. I see so many friends here and celebrating something that's really dear to me, dear to them, and evidenced by your presence here, dear to you. This is a city that has really got a history, and Carmen is such a cornerstone of that history. You can't do anything around here without Carmen knowing about it, without Carmen trying to lead it in the right direction, always properly. We'll talk about that later, Carmen. It's nice to have you all here. We're delighted to be a small part of that. Best wishes to Carmen, and thanks for all you've done for this community.
Thank you, Skip.
Okay. A pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Carmen.
It always is a pleasure being with you.
I know. So, I suppose we have to start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about where you were born, where you grew up, about the neighborhood you grew up in.
I was born in God's country. And he's saying okay. I was born in East LA, right in the middle of the barrio in East LA. And I was number 9 of 10 kids. Right in East LA. Something's wrong with these mics already?
No, we're good.
Okay. Again, I was born in East LA, and I didn't know there was another world. It was another world to me because I was lucky and blessed enough of having one sister that introduced me to a library. And if you're introduced to a library, you're introduced to the world. And so that was a lot of my time spent in my neighborhood. There wasn't too much going on in the neighborhood. I didn't see a white person until I went to school because there. Am I going to have to hold this now? Yeah. Jack, you're fired. Can you hear me now? Yes. Do I need a mic?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't see, too many people there. I had never seen a black person while I was growing up. It was brown. My neighborhood was brown. It was a barrio. And there I was until I went to school. And when I went to school, all the teachers were not my color. And so you spoke Spanish at home because my mom spoke Spanish. But when you went to school, you better learn how to speak English. And again, I'm 9 of 10. So they asked me, what do you speak at home? Spanglish, a little bit of both. So that was my neighborhood. That's where I grew up.
Okay. Did you discuss politics at home? Was that?
I don't ever remember thinking about politics. I mean, you're poor, you're in a barrio, you don't think about politics. I really started dealing with politics when I came to Long Beach. I come from now, I always say that your grandmother didn't pray for a lot of your aunts and uncles because half of them are Republicans. So I know that they were Republicans then. I know they were in my family. My family had a do-everything mentality, bootstrap mentality. And my brother, who was my father figure, if you will, made sure that we knew 3 words as we were growing up. And I was like number 9, and it had to be thank you, may I, and please. And it was a bootstrap mentality all the way. And he, my brother, was very much a victim of racism. So I know that he didn't want us to go through it. So he really worked with us in making sure that we knew who we were. So.
Oh, great. So why did you come to Long Beach?
Well, my husband's boss had some houses to sell in Long Beach, and I am so glad that he talked him into it. My husband came home one day and said, I think we're gonna take a ride to Long Beach tomorrow. I thought he meant to go to the beach. Why are we going to Long Beach? Well, I want to see some houses. You know, Jay has a couple of houses and we want to go and see them. Probably the best thing we ever did, buy those houses. Couldn't afford them now, but we bought 2 houses in Long Beach and we moved to Long Beach. When your mother was maybe 6 months old, 1960, we moved to Long Beach.
So Long Beach was pretty different then than it is now.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I got involved in Long Beach on my first, if I really been thinking about it, the first time I did anything for an elected official, he wasn't an elected official yet. My neighbor was a very, very dear friend of a gentleman that had a washing machine thing or something, a store, Bird Bond. See, there's some older people here. Bird Bond, he came over, him and my neighbor, and they said, you know, we're trying to get this person to win the election, and my husband and I had never met Jim Wilson. But we walked our neighborhood and passed out flyers. And then one day, after we were having dinner, there was a knock at the door, and we opened the door, and there was this big African-American guy standing there, and he said, hi, I'm Jim Wilson, and I hear you were working for me. And that was my first time I had met Jim Wilson. We were very happy we worked for him, and we did those flyers.
Well, that's wonderful. And it worked, because he won.
Yes, he did.
Nobody says no to Carmen.
You got that right.
So was Long Beach different than East LA when you grew up, or you moved to Long Beach at the time?
Yeah, there was people of all colors. Think about it. What I just said, I was in a barrio. It was all brown. And then I moved to Long Beach. And I made some wonderful friends in my neighborhood. But I'm sure my neighbors were very, very surprised to see a brown face in their neighborhood. I honestly believe, and I say this with every ounce of truth, I honestly believe I was the first Latina in my block ever. So yeah, and then my kids were going to go to school, and I became involved there.
How?
It was different. It was very, very different.
So working for Jim Wilson's campaign was the beginning, and then you said you got involved in the schools. What were you doing there?
Well, what we do now in my family is when a child is in elementary school and junior high or whatever, I became very much involved in Girl Scouts. My husband was the best. In fact, he got an award for driving all the kids to sell cookies. And I became a PTA president. I was a PTA president in the elementary school, in junior high, but then when I decided to stay with Wilson High School, I was working for the city, and maybe some of you remember I was working juvenile diversion, and I had this car that looked like a police car, and my kids were at high school, and they really didn't appreciate me driving up in that car, so I kind of stepped down on that one, you know, but I became very, very much involved in PTA and Girl Scouts for many, many years. Then I went to work for the school district. I worked at Lee Elementary School. And while I was at Lee Elementary School, one day I was so hurt because the principal called me into the office and said, I have this form, application, I want you to fill it out, and I want you to take it to the city. And I wasn't working in the city hall that they just tore down. Sharon, I was working in the old one, okay? And the old one, and I say, why would you want me to take this to city hall? And he goes, because you need to work for the whole community. And literally, I went, and the principal was Ray Ramos. But I used to volunteer. It was different then. in summer, you had summer playground. And I remember Bonnie, I remember her kids, all at Willard Elementary School, where I was a PTA president and where I met Jim Gray and started working with him. So many things have happened through Girl Scouts and PTA.
So was it Girl Scouts and PTA where you learned to organize?
I think so, because a lot of the women didn't want to. Interesting enough, I lived right on 10th and Dawson, okay? And a lot of the kids that went to Willard and to Jefferson were in the marina and the really rich area, and they'd be at my house all the time. My husband used to say, something wrong here. So I had to organize those mothers to, hey, don't send them to me, honey, you have to work with it. So we did a lot of organizing. I probably would say that one of the reasons I got involved in politics was Ronald Reagan.
Your hero?
I don't think so. He was going to be president, and he was speaking to the PTA boards. And by that time, I had already gotten into a higher, not only the PTA president at Willard, but in the district part of it. And I was not going to take what he was bringing down. So I worked to organize against him.
Excellent. Yeah. So you mentioned when you moved onto your block, there was no one else that looked like you. Was there anyone in city government that looked like you?
Hell no. No, there wasn't. Not when I moved in. I became friends. Probably the first person that I remember seeing and being a friend with that looked anything like me was Olivia Nieto. Mm-hmm. And I became friends with Olivia Nieto. In fact, I was so square, believe it or not. My family was it. Girl Scout, PTA was it. And Olivia Nieto was going to run as director of the Centro de la Raza, East Long Beach Neighborhood Center. And she wanted me to go vote for her. And I was working out at Lee. And so I took time off to sit down, and I met probably the most radical individuals ever there. And they literally did a job on me. I mean, I had to beg Olivia to please forgive me. But I met Armando Vasquez Ramos, and he was the perfect one that was telling me everything I wanted to hear. And there was Ron, there was Maria, there was Tom Blackburn, there was Teresa. These were radical individuals.
I knew it.
That wanted everything I wanted. And I don't know what happened to me, but I became part of them.
Now I know who to blame.
Holy hell, that went to hell. Probably the best thing. But working there, I think, was probably in the school district, learning things, and then learning the city, learning what they had to offer, and being bold enough to know that I really didn't know enough to go do what we were doing. Sometimes we'd sit at Ron and Phyllis. Sometimes we'd be in my front room thinking, what are we doing? How are we going to get this done? But we knew it was time to change the landscape of Long Beach.
So was that the beginning of at the time, what would have been called the Chicano political movement in Long Beach?
I think that was part of the reason we started the political. We knew right away, that power is never given. It's taken. And if you don't know anything else from this night, remember that. Power is never given. It's taken. And it's taken by being smart enough to know the issue, to know what the issue is and why. Just to be an ugly human being and go and demand things is not the way you do it. We didn't know that at the time. We were kicked out of a lot of meetings. But now we do know. And we know that you have to be ready, that you have to do it. It's taken me a long, long time to really say that out loud. And I say it to my grandkids all the time. Be ready. And don't be afraid. I can tell you a story. I hear that one of my best friend is sitting in there. I haven't seen him yet, but Jim Hayes, if you're here, I hope you can hear me.
He is.
I haven't seen him yet.
There he is. Raise your hand.
I hope he remembers this story, because I don't remember exactly where, but I think it was Beverly Hills. And if I'm not mistaken, it might have been, and I'm going a little bit over, but I'm just bringing in because of the color of my skin. We were walking a precinct, I think it was Beverly Hills, Jim, and I knocked on the door, and this lady was so happy to see me. You're answering the ad. Oh, thank you. Come on in. Jim was across the street. Remember that, Jim? But you know what? By this point, I knew I had to have a thick skin. And I said, you know what? I'll come back to you later. But you know what? I'm knocking on doors right now. I don't know who it was, but I think it might have been Zev's Beverly Hill or whatever it was. But I remember things like that.
Now, in this new movement, or fairly new for Long Beach, did you have allies, or was the Chicano group in it alone?
No, the Chicano group was alone in what we were doing. Did we have allies? You remember your boss coming to me, letting me know that she was going to run. When Renee Simon was running for senator, that Chicano caucus got together, and we were there all the time. We had Tuesday night, if I remember, right, Renee? We were there for her. So allies, I'm not sure we had allies, but remember, this is the beginning of the Chicano group, and it was the beginning of many of the things we had to do. So were we trustworthy of everybody? I'm not so sure. But we were knocking and we were doing things. Many a Saturday I spent with Ron Arias. I know Phyllis was so jealous of me.
Who can blame her?
Yeah. Because I had, Ron Arias and I would have the ironing board. And we would go to markets and we'd set it up and we would make sure that we registered people. And then when I used to go to St. Matthew's Church, and I asked the priest, Father Michael, if we could possibly register outside the church when people came out, and he said yes, but only if you register everyone. We said, absolutely, we will do that. And then about 2 weeks later, he said, Carmen, you're only registering Democrats. What in the world is happening? You have no Republicans in this parish. Needless to say, we no longer were able to register people. But yes, we made, that was a war on poverty. So if you remember everything, the other groups wanted the same dollars we were wanting. The other groups wanted the same appointments that everybody else wanted. So did we have a lot of group togetherness? Maybe some. I remember working with two ladies that I think were very, very instrumental in my life, and that was Mary Butler and Del Clinton. So, yeah.
So you mentioned the East Long Beach Neighborhood Center, which I think also was known as Centro de la Raza. So was the work that you've been talking about done with the center, or did people become a part of that? Was it separate?
I think we mashed them both. We had to be very, very careful of what we could do at the Centro de la Raza because we were getting federal monies, I think, in that. So that was the reason that we started. I mean, we got smart really fast. We started the Chicano political caucus because of that, and we wanted to make sure. I mean, I can tell the story of one time I said to one of the mayors, you have no one that looks like me or no one with a Spanish last name in any of your commissions. And God bless him, Ernie Kell said, I don't, because I don't have anybody. I don't know any. And I said, well, I do. And I think, Elvia Delgadillo became the first commissioner in transportation, was it, Elvia?
Yep,
Yeah.
Long Beach
So,
Transit
you know,
Board.
we had to fight for a lot of things. So I put my name in for the harbor commissioner. I was having an event for Jenny that night, and the place on Pacific, it used to be a gas station, I don't know what the name was.
No, the filling station.
Yeah. God, you remember. And somebody came in and said, "Oh, Carmen, we're sorry." And I said, "What happened?" And they said, "Oh, he's appointed someone else." I said, "It's okay. I put my name in. That's okay." And then he came over about an hour later, and I said, "You could have told me." He said, "Told you what?" I said, "You've already appointed." He said, "I'm not even going to go to the paper until tomorrow, until you're there." And I got it. So
Seemed to have worked out.
I think so. I think you have to work for a lot of things. I don't have a problem working for a lot of things. I think you have to. But you also, as I said earlier, power isn't given, it's taken. You also have to let everybody know that you're not going to fold. And that's what you do.
So you mentioned Olivia Nieto. Can you talk a little bit about her campaign and your involvement?
You bet. Olivia Nieto was extremely close with me and taught me a lot. I met her at the school. Remember, her father had the church right across the street from Lee Elementary School. And I met her. And I think she was at Cal State Long Beach at that time. She was in Mecha, I think. I'm not sure, but we talked, and then she said she was going to run for office, and I wanted to help her. And I learned how to read a precinct sheet with her, but I'll go into that a little later, because the precinct sheet in that was my mentor. I think my political mentor of all times was Don Foltz. And he said how dumb we were in doing what we were doing at that time. So we learned. Again, we learned. I keep telling all my kids, failure is the best teacher you'll ever have, because you'll find out what you did wrong. But I worked with Olivia, and I worked with Olivia going to, you're dealing in the 60s and 70s, honey, and you had to, pound on the desk, and you had to do this, you had to do that, to get everybody's attention. And Olivia was very much the lady, but she was very smart. She put me up in the front. And I would be the bad guy, the good guy, bad cop kind of routine. To this day, we have an Olivia in our family, my granddaughter named. But Olivia was the mentor for many of us as we started. As we were starting to, she taught us a lot.
So Carmen, you didn't just fight for Latinos. You also were very involved in defeating the Briggs Amendment, which would have prohibited gays and lesbians from teaching in schools or working at a school. Can you talk a little bit how you got involved?
One of the things that I'm most proud of is I have received the Lambda Awards twice. I started working with Democrats, and let me get to Don Foltz. Don Foltz introduced me to a young man, Frank Cook. I think I've got it right. Yep. Frank Cook. And then there was a Mike Lonergan, and they were sitting there. And Don said, if you have anybody that's going to help you, I've never met him. Didn't even know what Lambda was. He said, if you have anybody that you're going to know, you're going to be able to work with Carmen Perez. So they went home with me. The two guys went home with me, and I sat down and talked to them. Tell me what Lambda's about. Who are you? And the whole thing. Then they told me about the Briggs Initiative. And I said, okay. Well, Don Foltz had a very good friend. I think I'm correct in saying his name was Lupe Cabrera very good, John. You're as old as I am. In Hawaiian Gardens. He used to own a store, but he would always let us use the phone and that. And there was this one young guy who was going to become an assemblyman, Mike Gordon. And so Mike Gordon, myself, and about 6 Lambda groups decided to take the worst part that we could go into with Lambda, and that was Lakewood. Think about it. So I said, they kept saying, why do you want to do Lakewood? And I said, because if you can break Lakewood, you'll be able to break anything. So, and Mike said, I'm a little afraid of this. What am I doing? If you remember this one, Jim, I said, you just keep walking. If you get frightened, you get walking. He didn't only do Lakewood. We I think he walked all the way to Cerritos by the time he was so frightened. But I will tell you, we would knock on the doors and we would say, hi, Mrs. Smith, my name is Carmen and I'm here today on the Briggs Initiative, and are you for it or against it? Well, we're against it, ma'am. Bah, the door would close. I mean, it was horrible. But we went over and over and over that. And of course, we won. So it was just a deal of going and going and going and going. Years later, I became very good friends with both of them. I was vice chair of the Democratic Party, I think, for the nation at that time when we had for California. And I said to one of the guys called me, and it was Mike Lenegren from Texas, and he said, I'll see you at the convention. I said, oh, I'm so happy you became a delegate. And he said, no, I'm just going. Well, what the hell do you mean you're just going? You need tickets. And he goes, I know the chair. I'm going to your room. So we became very, very good friends, all of us. So.
Well, now everyone knows that if you're a Democrat and you're going to run for office in Long Beach, you have to talk to Carmen Perez. And one of the people who I think had heard that and came to talk to you, who you mentioned earlier, was Jenny Oropesa. Can you talk about how when you met her and then you two were partners in crime for a long time?
Yeah. She doesn't know. She never knew how to drive, when the wheel was on this side.
Oh, in other countries.
In another country.
When it's on the when
and
on
I was
the right.
dumb enough to get in the car with her. We became friends. She came to see me and she wanted to let me know that she wanted to run for the school board. With the first one?
First thing she ran for was city council.
City council. And then she went to an event at Ron and Phyllis's. And her dad was there. And at that time, everybody smoked. I know I did. And drank and smoked. God, that was good. And we'd go outside. And the father said, are you really going to run her campaign? And we did. And we became very, very good friends. She was probably one of the brightest, more devoted person we knew that was running for office all the time and ran for the right reason, not to be a city councilwoman, not to be a board member, not to be anything, but to do the right thing. We became friends, but running her campaign sometimes was unbelievable. 2, 3 in the morning was not unusual for us to be putting packets together. 6 o'clock in the morning, the firefighters were wonderful. They were not going to go out at 10 o'clock in the morning to do anything, but at 6 o'clock in the morning, we were putting out flyers. We were doing everything that needed to be done. Again, the only thing I would say to Jenny, you cannot be afraid, Jenny. You just have to get out there and do what you have to do. And nobody could carry a conversation better than her.
It's true, and if there were two strong-headed women, it was Carmen Perez and was Jenny Oropesa.
Somebody said, are you going to tell all the stories? And I said, hell no, don't worry about it. You're right, there were some good times. Right, Linda?
Yes. So it was through Jenny that you and I met.
Can I tell the story?
Sure.
There's some mujeres here. We call ourselves Las Mujeres of Long Beach. One of the guys, my David, all of them, they would sit in the front room. They'd be having a drink, but we were sitting in the dining room table just having our drinks and having a glass of wine. And, we knew each other, every one of them, professional woman, and all of us have known each other through friendships, deaths in the family, affairs, divorces, everything. But probably on the 5th bottle of wine, the only non-Hispanic became our president. Sharon Weissman. So one of the guys said, do you all know that she's Jewish, right? And I said, yes, Weissman. Why is she the president? And she said, because I was popping the bottles.
Someone's got to open the bottles, and someone has to figure out the check. So, so as I mentioned, nobody runs for office who's a Democrat who doesn't come talk to Carmen Perez. Were there any interesting folks that came to see you that you don't have to name names, but people
Oh yeah.
that you said yes, I'll help you, or you said no, don't do that?
No, I said no. I said no a lot. I did. I say people that were running for office in City Hall, and you sit down and you talk to them. But if you're active in your city, you know who's active. You know who belongs to what organizations, and you don't have to agree with them all the time. I keep saying that to my family. You know what? That's what's so beautiful about politics. You have 2, maybe even 3. I am far from being a progressive. You cannot, and I said to Sharon, the one thing that you need to know, you better not call me a
Liberal?
No. Oh, I don't care about liberal, but I am probably so conservative when it comes to law and order. Okay? I am more liberal than all of you put together when it comes to civil rights. Okay? There's a difference. When it comes to civil rights, I will be very, very liberal. But I know, and as you grow older, you know even better, it's okay to hear a different opinion. I mean, feel sorry for them as you walk out. But, you can get a different opinion. Remember what I told you when I started. I come from a family that my mother didn't pray a lot for. There are Republicans in my family. And even today there's some Trumpers. Okay? But I love them, and I say an extra prayer every night for them.
I hope it works at some point.
I know. Well, I think it's already working. Yeah.
So I just want to go back a little. You mentioned working as a community aide at Lee Elementary. Mm-hmm. And so there's a story here. There's a good story about where you went next, how it happened. Well, actually, you talked about that. I'm sorry, but if this
there was
you
2
want to
people.
add.
Olivia Nieto went to see my principal, Mr. Ramos, and they said that I should be at City Hall. And I have to tell you, I was so hurt that they would even think of moving me out of the school district. Does everybody remember that during summer they used to have summer playground? And I used to be in the summer playground, and then we used to go play under the lights. And now it's Hamilton. It used to be Hamilton Bowl. I don't know, they've changed it. Yeah, and we've done all of that. So I went to work for the city. When I went to work for the city, I went to work for community relations. And I can't even think. It was Ray Brosterhouse. Very good. You're as old as I am too, honey. Ray Brosterhouse was my boss. It was probably some of the best time I've ever had, because with that, they wanted to know what I had to offer, and pretty soon I was in juvenile diversion with the police department. And I decided to start baseball games with the cops and all the gang members. Boy, that was fun. There was a couple of times that I thought, oh my God, they're going to start a fight with a policeman, and I'm going to be right in the middle. But it was fun. And the day that I was laid off was Proposition 13, because I was the last hired. So I was fired at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Laid off.
Laid off.
Nobody would dare fire you.
I've never been fired. You're right.
I told you.
I was laid off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and at 8 o'clock that evening, I received Woman of the Year award. I could not believe that. 2 things happening in the same day, from Fred Schell and Renee Simon and others. It was unbelievable. What a day. But
well, tell us, then you ended up working for LA County Supervisor Yvonne Burke. How did that happen?
I worked for Yvonne Burke when she was running for office for Attorney General. Remember, she against Duke Majan, right, Renee? Yeah. And Attorney General, and I worked for her all over. And when she ran, she called and she said, I'd love to have you work for me as a deputy. And I became an assistant to a deputy. So I worked for her. And I then, remember, she was not elected, she was appointed the first time. And that's how I went to work for Yvonne Burke. I loved it. They made me the health deputy. I didn't know anything about health. But I became the health deputy, and a darn good one. And decided to go to school then to learn a little bit more about health deputy. I worked for her, and then when, I can't think of the guy that ran against her.
Dean Dana.
Dean Dana. When Dean Dana and her ran the race, I worked her campaign, and she lost that race. And I went to work for County UC Medical Center. So.
But then you ended up back at the County Hall of Administration working
And I
for...
say this, and it is, everything I'm saying is the truth, because I think a lot of people say, oh, he wouldn't do that. I worked for County UC Medical Center. And by my department, office was away from the main building. And one day I got a call, and they said, there is a supervisor in the building, and he wants to see a Carmen Perez. And my boss, Paul Drow, said, what the hell were you doing? And I said, I have no idea. Okay. And he came over, and I went over, and he was sitting there. This before he was in a wheelchair. And I said, Mr. Hahn. And he said, you're the person that ran my son's campaign. Remember I did the campaign? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I'd like you to come and work for me. I knew I was climbing the steps to go up higher in the hospital administration, and I knew that Kenny Hahn would make that dollar cry in his wallet before he took it out. So I knew I was not going to, is that saying it nice?
Yes.
I love the man, I love the man. So I knew that he wasn't going to give me what I was capable of doing. So then I said, thank you, sir. I'm working my way up this schedule, and I think I'm going to stay with it. And he said, okay. So then he came back 3 times, and on a handshake, not on anything else. I said, Mr. Hahn, I'm going to work for you for a year. And we had talked about what we wanted to do. If I don't deliver in a year, I can come back here, but I want you to make sure that you write something down in my file that says I can come back where I'm at right now, so I won't lose anything. And I said, okay. He said okay to that. But if I do everything I'm telling you I'm going to, I am going to make sure that, you're going to make sure that I get everything I deserve. In 1 year, I became assistant chief deputy at that point. In 1 year. It was not an easy transition. Again, here comes a brown face. All of you know about Kenny Hahn. His office was more than half African American. And I was going to be the health deputy. And I was going to go to Martin Luther King. But the people that worked there was a few of them that were so upset that I've been here with you for 5 years. She just became assistant chief deputy. And one day, there was a staff meeting, and I asked the chief deputy, Mas Fukai, to step out, and that I was going to handle this meeting myself. And I went, boom, how many years have you been here? 11? 5, 6? You've had 11 years over me. Why aren't you chief deputy now? It's not my fault. But you know what? Most of them thought I was there to change the name of Martin Luther King Hospital to Cesar Chavez. not even asking me, who was a person that I absolutely adored, Martin Luther King, right? Who did I work for? Martin Luther King. How do you even think that? But it took a while. But there was a Brad Pye there. I don't know if anybody remembers the name Brad Pye. Yeah, he used to be an announcer. He was wonderful. And all of the people there were just great. Once they knew that I was not there for anything other than to do my job and become chief deputy, of course, I did very, very well there. And I loved it. And as I spoke at that funeral in the eulogy, again, what a blessing to meet someone in politics that not only will pull his hand out to give you that hand up, but be good. Can I have some water?
You have some right here.
Oh, never mind. Can you open it?
It is open. Yep. Well, you know what? Perhaps on that note, we'll take a little break because I see some people have empty wine glasses. So we're going to take a little 10-minute break, and then
Thank
we'll
you.
be back. You're
I hope
welcome.
it's been okay.